Hi, and welcome to the Changing Perspectives podcast, the show where we discuss a variety of topics including grief, parenting, health and wellness, and relationships. Join us and explore a number of changing perspectives. We're your hosts, Jenni and Josh Brennan. Hi, Jenni.
Hi.
So welcome to episode 3. This is exciting. We're cruising right along.
We really are.
Yeah. So do you want to give us a rundown of what today's episode is about?
I think when we were talking about, or when you were pressuring me into doing a podcast, one of the very first topics that came to mind for both of us was talking about pet loss, because we have always had a pet. Yes. Since the very first time, the day we moved into our very first apartment, the first thing we did is we went and got ourselves a cat.
Right.
That day. So since that day, we've had pets. And because that was, I don't know how many years ago, almost 20 years ago.
20 years ago.
We should probably keep that in. That was one of our pets knocking over a gate.
We should absolutely keep that in. You know, one of my favorite recordings of all time is, what is the...
Sounds like it's really favorite.
It's exciting. Anyway, when you hear on the final version of an album, like somebody clearing their throat, I think that's great.
Okay.
And that can be us. That's
okay.
Pixie.
That's
everybody. We get to introduce you to our wonderfully crazy, weird cat, Pixie, who just made a big noise here in our studio, quote unquote.
Yeah, we should kick her out for the next ones.
We should.
Anyways, we've always had pets, and because it's been so many years, that means that we've had a lot of pet loss, and we've experienced those losses with our children. And I think it can be really important to look at how do you explore pet loss with children. And in fact, it's probably one of the questions I get asked most about professionally is, you know, our dog is aging, or our cat just died, or, you know, should I get a pet? What should I do when they die? Like, how do we approach these topics with kids? So our intent today is to kind of go over some tips for handling pet loss, specifically with kids, but also there will be some tips in there infused in for adults as well.
What I didn't think about was exploring this topic from our experience as kids. I don't think we ever talked about that.
We didn't talk about that.
Yeah,
That's
we'll
true. No, we both had
should.
pets growing up as children.
We always had pets, right. And I'm a gigantic animal lover. I'm pretty sure that in a past life I was a vet, or I worked for some sort of pet organization. I'm a gigantic animal lover. I'm notoriously kind of anti-zoo, not a big fan of zoos, but I'm all about animal rights and love animals. I wanted to talk about real quick some of the science behind why humans love animals. I'm a big nerd. I like doing the why, finding out the why behind the what and the science behind certain things, and there's science behind why we love animals. We love animals because of the unconditional relationship that we have with animals. Human relationships are conditional in a lot of ways. I think we see that in our everyday lives, but our relationships with our animals are unconditional. We love that they don't care about anything that we did that day. They don't care about how bad our day was, or the stress at work, or the stress with other things in our lives. They just love us. They love when we come home and we give them attention and we snuggle with them and all that. So it's an unconditional relationship. Some of the stuff that I looked into was interesting. I learned about how we as humans sort of have created domestic animals evolution a little bit. How we sort of bred out of them just naturally occurring, not really on purpose, it sounds like, just over history, bred out of these animals some of the things that they needed for different situations where they were going to be more aggressive because of a competition for food and other resources. We give them those resources so they don't need to have those sort of traits anymore. In addition, humans love puppies and kittens. And humans are attracted to those sort of juvenile characteristics of an animal. And so just naturally over time, domestic animals sort of had those traits stick with them through the generations, sort of shorter nostrils, eyes that are wider apart, sort of those characteristics that make dogs and kittens look like, or dogs and cats rather, look like baby dogs and cats. We love that.
Puppies and kittens.
Puppies and kittens. And so I was reading an article, and there was a study done where they took, as we all know, dogs came from wolves, right? That's a well-known thing in evolution. They did a study where they looked at 100 wolf skulls and 100 skulls of domestic dogs from today, and the dog skulls were most most resembled the skulls of juvenile wolves. And so humans have just over time basically created these domestic animals that look like puppies and that are really nice and don't need to fight for food. And we have these animals that we love unconditionally, and they unconditionally love us back. So that's a little bit of the science. I don't know if Jenni might have been bored during that. You might have been bored. But I like the science behind things. I don't know.
Can I wake up now?
Can you wake up? Go ahead.
I'm very solutions focused, so I'm not so interested in the what behind things. If you come to me for therapy, we will start with where you're at. And if you want to, we'll dig into the past and kind of see how that influences things. So right. I appreciate that you're here to bring in the boring stuff. that is certainly, I'm sure it's very interesting to other people. So
it's interesting.
But that was interesting. Yeah, there was a lot of information there.
I'll include the link to some of those articles in the show notes.
Yes, for other like-minded folks. What was I going to say about that, though? I don't remember. I got lost there. As you were,
because what I was saying was so riveting and interesting,
something like that.
Yeah.
But I was thinking that for many of us, pet loss is really our first loss. It's really our first experience with death. Mm-hmm. Not always, sometimes. There are some people that don't like pets.
Those are weird people.
No,
right.
there are people that don't like pets.
That's okay. We're not going to yuck your yum. Oh, I did it. I used it, a phrase that makes Jenni cringe. No, but people don't like pets, and that's okay.
Yeah, so for those people, pets are probably not your first experience with loss. But for a lot of other people, this is your first experience with loss, which is why we're talking about this topic today. So,
should we talk about the pet loss we had as kids?
Yeah, sure. I hadn't thought about that.
Me neither.
What's really funny?
We experienced one together that was pretty powerful. Because if you listen to episode 1, you know that Jenni and I are high school sweethearts. We've been together a long time. And Jenni's childhood dog, Tammy, was such a sweetheart. And I fell in love with Tammy when we started dating Jenni in high school. And then she passed away. I don't even remember how long. But we've experienced that pet loss together.
I don't really remember much about that.
Her dying?
Yeah.
You know she's dead, right? Okay.
What? I was thinking about my bird that died.
Oh, Smurfy?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Go ahead and talk about Smurfy.
She was blue and white, and we very cleverly called her Smurfy.
We had a bird growing up named Larry Bird. So bird names are notoriously silly, I guess. I don't know.
No, I feel
very on the nose, on the beak.
Smurfy must have been my first pet loss. That must have been why I thought of that first. But
I didn't mean to indicate that Tammy was your first. I just know we experienced that one together.
Yeah, no, we've had a lot of them together.
We have.
And I think each one has been unique, which is actually sort of my first sort of tip here, is that to remember that every child and adult who's experienced pet loss is unique. So that the pet that they're losing is unique. The relationship that they had with the pet is unique. Where they are in their lifespan development is unique. And so that's important to remember, that every pet loss experience is going to be different.
Right.
And that two people, like yourself and myself, can experience the loss of the same pet, like Tammy, and have different reactions to that and have different experiences to that. Certainly I was sad, but it seems like maybe for you, that experience was a little bit more ingrained. Right. And also, your memory is better than mine.
That is true. Well, yeah, I remember my first pet loss was, speaking of pet names, there was a cat that sort of was my cat, I guess, when I was little. And my parents let me name him. And this was in the late 80s, early 90s. And I thought it would be cool to name a cat Rad.
That's so totally rad.
And that's so totally rad. So his name is Rad. He was a cool cat, a black cat. And he was my cat. And he died. He actually got hit by a car, unfortunately. And I had this vivid memory of seeing his body, actually.
Oh. How old were you?
I want to say 10, maybe, okay. 10 or 11. And it was across the street from my parents' house. And this was back when kids went outside to play. So I remember being outside, riding my bike. And for weeks, I think this is right around the time I had a paper route. So I was out about in the neighborhood a lot. So I remember actually seeing his remains.
Oh.
On the side of the road. Like
they
vivid
just
memory.
Kept him there?
Yeah.
Oh, that's terrible.
Yeah, it's not good.
Do you remember being interested in it? Like, kind of from a sort of fascination standpoint? Like, did you want to look at it?
Yes.
That's pretty much in line with where you were cognitively as a child then.
Right,
kids in that age group are really starting to get very interested in, like, the human body and what happens when you die.
I didn't think of that until right now during the episode. I had no plans to talk about Rad, but that just came up in my head.
I'm sorry. That's pretty traumatizing to have
those
images in your mind. That brings up a good point, that pet loss, I guess in my mind, I was thinking about pet loss that is kind of anticipatory. You know, all the pets that we've lost, fortunately, knock on wood, have been pets that have lived a long life, and we knew that they were approaching the end of their life, and
it was like a palliative care situation.
Yeah.
We'll talk more about
right. So we were able to sort of do some anticipatory grief work around that. But there are pets that can die really suddenly.
Yeah.
You know, I know someone that just recently lost really a puppy. I think the dog was under 3 years of age, just really suddenly. And pets can get hit by cars. Pets can kind of get lost, get out and run away, and you never see them again. So that's important to keep in mind, too, when you're exploring pet loss, is the circumstances around the death of the pet.
Mm-hmm. Just a quick PSA. Keep your pets inside.
No judgments.
No judgments.
This is a judgment-free zone.
Judgment-free zone, but keep your pets inside, I think. But outdoor cats
Or don't.
Or don't. Okay.
Go to a zoo, or don't.
Yes.
Do what you want.
Do what you want, and we support you. Yes.
One of us will, at least. So that was my first tip, was just to remember that every experience is really unique, and to take that into consideration. I think this next one is such a stickler for me. Be honest. And I see a lot of adults really kind of move away from this when they're thinking about pet loss and how to talk about it with children from a well-intended standpoint. You know, they want to protect their kids. But I have a lot of people that have said to me, like, oh, my hamster died, or my fish died, or my cat died, or they'll post this on social media. Where can I get a gold hamster that has a white stripe down its belly before 2 o'clock today? Because I need to replace it.
I feel like we see that a lot in the media and movies and television, where they perpetuate that. Oh, we got to. It's like a funny thing in a sitcom.
Yes.
Oh, we got to replace the fish.
It's funny, but it happens. And you know, that post I'm talking about, that's a legitimate post that I've seen from friends. You know, that's just our instinct as adults, as parents, is to protect our kids. And so, of course, we don't want them to come home from school, and we don't want to have the difficult conversation of saying Smurfy's dead, so we'd like to just replace it with another blue and white bird.
Right.
But that's really not helping your kids.
No.
Because when their grandparent dies, or when any loved one dies, you can't replace them.
No.
At least not now.
Right.
So at some point, your child is going to be faced.
We haven't perfected clones yet.
We haven't. It would really make my life easier if we could.
Well, put you out of a job, kind of.
Maybe.
Right.
But at some point, your kids are going to come face to face with death.
Mm-hmm.
And, we hope that it won't happen early in life, but it might. And if you can lean into real pet loss and really use it as an experience, a learning experience for your kids, and be honest and open with them, it's going to serve them well. It's going to set a foundation for them as they do experience death throughout their life.
Can we talk about, I don't know if you had planned to bring this up, but our family's first experience.
Murray?
Yeah.
Yes.
Because
so we did not do this experience right. Actually,
we did, though.
No, we didn't. So we should have our 13-year-old come out here, because I think he's traumatized by this. I did not handle this correctly. So Murray was a fish.
Yes.
We didn't really like this fish. It was a beta fish. He was with us, I don't know, for a year, two.
Does anybody like beta fish?
I don't know.
I'm not sure.
Our oldest child was 3. And, he would help feed the fish every morning, and the fish was right there on our piano in our living room, was very much a part of our life. And we never, ever talked about Murray, the fish, dying. But Easter Sunday, we woke up, and Murray was dead in the tank. We had not been anticipating this, and we were in a rush to get ready. We had a 3-year-old and a baby, and we were not hosting Easter. We were going to someone's house for Easter. Or maybe we were, I think we were going to someone's house.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So we were in a rush to get out and really minimize the loss, because Josh and I were thinking, big deal. It's Murray. It's not our dog. It's not our cat. It's just a fish. We'll get a new fish. And so we were very kind of matter of fact about it with our child.
But, what inspired me to bring this up now was the tip about being honest, because we were honest with him. We didn't try to replace Murray.
True,
Right.
But we just flushed Murray down the toilet.
What else do you do with a fish, though?
Well, I think we could have had more of a service. We could have talked about it more. We could have asked Jackson, our oldest, what he wanted to do, because he was pretty horrified when we flushed him down the toilet. So that's another tip, is to sort of consider having some sort of memorial service and incorporate the children into that. So if I could go back in time, I would have probably called where we were going for Easter and said, we're going to be late. 30 minutes late.
Right.
And we would have sat down and asked Jackson what he wanted to do. Did he want to flush him down the toilet? Did he want to bury him? What were his other thoughts? I wish we had incorporated some more of that for him, because this was his first death experience.
It was. And to tie this episode into our first or last episode about how to prepare children for wakes and funerals, we talked about recognizing the relationship of the loss with the child. And clearly our relationship with Murray was different than Jackson's.
Right. So in retrospect, I wish we had handled it. I wish we had taken that. I wish we hadn't minimized it. I think ultimately we minimized it.
I think you're right. I have memories, though, of standing there in Jackson with his Easter gear on and his nice clothes. As we said a few words.
We did.
We had a memorial service.
At the toilet.
I don't know where else you would have a fish memorial service.
I don't know. Maybe you bury it. I think we just told him that's what you do. And then it was... How
did the fish toilet thing start? That's something.
You know what? That's something you can research.
Because that's interesting. We don't do
that. You can do that podcast on your own.
Right? I can do that one on my own. How toilet fish funerals work.
Yeah.
Right.
I'm busy that day.
Okay.
So that kind of leads into the next tip, which was invite them to be part of the process. And we did. We did a good job with that. But I wish we hadn't rushed it. So I would add in, it's important to be really mindful. And even if it interferes with your day, even if it's just a stupid fish, or like a hamster that you never really liked, or I don't know, a pet snake or something, that you really take some time. You hit pause on your life and take a little extra time to kind of acknowledge the loss and not minimize it.
Right.
Next sort of thought I had would to have some resources available for kids. There's a lot of books out there that talk about death and grief and loss for kids. Some of them are great, some of them are not so great. One of my favorite teaching days when I was teaching funeral service students would be when I would bring in a armful of children's books around grief and break them up into groups and really merge my preschool teaching days with my college teaching days and have them read books to each other and then talk about them. And the books I brought each time were different. I would just pretend that I was someone who experienced loss and I was looking for resources from the public library, and I would just go and get what they had at the time and then bring them in. So there can be great resources, books that really align with a family's use of language. And there can be books that aren't so great, that don't align with a family's language, a family's values. So when I say have books available, what I mean is read them first as the parents, read them first as the adults, and figure out if they're going to fit well with your kids, and then have them available. I'm of the belief that there should be books like that just available all the time. And in children's homes, in children's classrooms, just available, just as any other topic, just there so that kids, if they choose to, they can access that information.
Making it, I was just going to say, making that information accessible, those resources, taking away the negative connotation about death and loss and these tough.
Yeah, the taboo.
Right.
The more you avoid something or ignore it or sort of put it on a shelf and not talk about it, the more you make it taboo and the more you make the experiences around it kind of shameful.
Right.
Our next pet loss with our kids, I think we handled very differently. So that was our cat.
Can I remind you about something I thought was interesting?
Oh no, did I forget one?
No, well, sort of, but excuse me. The moment we had to bury a bunny, do you remember that?
Oh yes.
And because I thought about memorial service and and I had this image of us being in the backyard, and
I took pictures of that because I thought it was very meaningful.
It was meaningful.
So we moved into our new home, and the same day, the next day.
It was very close.
Shortly thereafter,
within the same week,
we had gone out. Josh and I had gone out for a date night, which we will talk about in future episodes around how to make time for yourselves as a couple. But we had gone out for our first date night with our wonderful babysitter in charge of our children, and during that, was that when the dog killed the bunny?
Yes.
Yes, and also when the smoke alarms went off and the fire department had to be called.
Yes.
Boy, our babysitter was a saint.
Yes. Shout out to her who actually just had her first baby.
Yes.
Congratulations.
We love you, Laura.
Yes.
But so one of our dogs, for the first time ever, had a fenced-in backyard and was loving it. And apparently the people that lived here before us didn't have dogs, and so there were a lot of bunnies that lived in our yard and didn't know that dogs had moved in. And when nature meets nature, sometimes nature happens. So our dog killed a bunny, and our children were horrified.
A live, real life Disney movie happening in our backyard, and there it was. We had a dead bunny.
Is there a Disney movie where a dog kills a bunny?
Animals always die in Disney movies.
True.
Aren't we going to talk about that in a future episode?
Yes.
More to come on that.
So our children were devastated because not only was there death, but there was actually murder in our backyard. So we didn't minimize that. We really kind of leaned into that. And so we had a memorial service for the bunny, and we buried the bunny. And I think one or both of the kids drew pictures, and we don't have a plaque or a memorial stone for the bunny, but we know where the bunny is buried in our backyard. Right. So that thank you for reminding me of that. That was sort of their next foray into death.
And as we go through this episode, I think talking about the different types of memorial services we've had experience with, and bringing in different elements as we go through. Like that one was outside. It was beautiful that day. We all were standing around. I think I had even the boys help bury the bunny and actually put some dirt over the grave. So there's different things you can do.
And we didn't force them. That
Right.
was what they wanted to do. So again, kind of getting back to every child is unique, every experience is unique. Allow them to figure out how much they want to participate in any services, if there are any. Our kids might have said, no, we're fine, we don't need a service, and we wouldn't have done it.
Right.
Maybe we would have to help with our guilt.
Right. Do we want to
ourselves.
talk about our next one? I think that's a different one, and had some other stressful elements to it.
Are we thinking of the same one?
Jogger.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Jogger was our very first pet.
Yeah.
And
This is part of the so I might start crying a little
Aw.
bit. Right.
we had Jogger. This was the pet that we got the day we moved into our apartment,
Yeah.
our very first apartment. So that was in 2001.
One.
And Jogger was with us in Massachusetts. She was with us when we drove out to Colorado and lived out there.
drove back.
And she was with us when we added, it was just Jogger, and then we added 2 dogs and
Yes.
another cat. So when we moved back from Colorado, it was Jogger.
She put up with a lot.
She did. Jogger and 3 other pets, and then we had human children, and Jogger was with us through all of that and was with us in every single place that we've lived.
Yes.
Every single house, every single apartment, she was with us. And so
Can I explain her name just real quick for
Oh, yeah,
people? Because, well, we're all of our pets are rescue pets. Rescue your pets. There's so many pets out there and rescue agencies that need a home. Anyway, so we
or buy
don't.
them from responsible breeders and pet shops. You do you.
Yes, you do. You do the nice thing, and I'll do me. No, that's okay. So we don't do a lot of changing. I guess we've kept a lot of the rescue names that we. Anyway, so the rescue agency had named her because of the way her back legs looked when she walked. It looks like she was running, so they named her Jogger.
True story.
Yes.
Yes, so that was her name. So Jogger was a very elder cat and was always here for our kids. You know, she was
Yeah.
just there from the beginning. And as she got older, it became very apparent that she was dying and was very comfortable. So we never had to make the decision to euthanize her. But there was one day where we woke up. It was just a normal day. We were getting ready for work, getting ready for school. And it was very clear that she was actively dying, but was comfortable.
Right.
And so we were able to have our kids say goodbye if they wanted to. We were able to give them the option of saying goodbye because we knew she was dying, and we also knew she wanted to be alone. So we kind of left. And I think this is a moment that our youngest will always remember, because we all left, and then Josh, you came back
With
him
Jacob.
and walked into the house and found her. And I think Jacob often talks about how he remembers walking into the
Seeing her.
house and seeing her. And he must have been 4.
Maybe. Yeah.
Yeah.
Not
much
more
older
that.
than 4. He was definitely preschool age.
It's one of those things that will stick. Like my memory of seeing Rad, his body across the street, he will remember Jogger's body.
And that was his first real foray into death. And it was interesting watching our boys' reactions to that, because they had very different reactions. Our oldest was at school, and we felt it was really important to hold on to the body so that our oldest, when he got home from school, could have the option of seeing the body.
Right.
When he got home, which sounds morbid, right? You know, as we're sitting here talking about this, I'm very much aware that people might be thinking, oh my goodness, they're crazy. Like, just
Right.
get rid of the body. But really, for some children, for some adults, it's really important, actually for a lot, it's important to see the dead individual. It's important to sort of have that connection, that reinforcement that this person, this pet that I loved is gone.
Right.
But to be able to see them one more time and to be able to touch them.
Right.
You know, there's this TED Talk, which maybe I will post in the show notes. It's a game warden, I think, in Maine, who talks about an experience where a little girl really wanted to see the body of her friend who had just died. And a lot of folks were against that, but it was so healing for this little girl. And that is so often for many people an instinct. And so I don't remember which one it was. Was it our oldest one that wanted to touch?
I think it was Jackson.
I think it was Jackson. I think it was our oldest really wanted to sort of feel her, and that was okay. So again, recognizing that each child is unique,
Right.
meeting them where they're at, incorporating them as much or as little as they want into the process. And we had a memorial service and gave the kids an option of participating. And
They drew pictures.
They drew pictures, and I think one chose not to participate, not to be outside with us at the memorial service.
Right. Yeah.
And that was okay.
Yeah.
So I'm glad we handled it that way.
So we buried Jogger. And
not with the baby bunny. She's on the other side of the yard.
She's on the other side, and she does have a little plaque out there.
Yeah. So that was an opportunity for us to sort of, I guess, lean more into individualizing a memorial service and letting the kids sort of dictate how to approach that death. And we also allowed for them to ask a lot of questions around that. That's really important too. Another tip here is to allow for dialogue and discussion around it. And that may happen right away, or it might not come up until a few weeks later.
Right.
Kids sometimes need a little bit longer to sort of process.
I think letting them guide, the discussion and letting them tell you how involved they want to be is extremely important. Mm-hmm. Sometimes you are you're bound by the situation that you're in with that particular pet. I'm thinking of the next two losses we had and how different they were.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk? We want to dive
so
into
both
that?
of those were decisions, again, older pets, so dogs that we had, dogs that our children had since the day they were born. These were dogs that we had in our life. We acquired them we adopted them in Colorado, and that was prior to having our human children.
Rescued them.
We rescued them.
Adopted is good too.
So sorry. So they were staples in our children's lives. And just like Jogger, they were getting older, and we had to, with both of them, make the difficult decision to euthanize. So this was a different discussion to have with our children. It was not, Jogger's naturally dying today. It's we are going to have to talk to the doctor about ending their life. And that was, a different kind of discussion to have with our kids. But it was a discussion we did have with our kids. And actually, we involved them. Our vet was fantastic. And
unbelievable.
For the first one, came out and did the euthanasia in our house. And we had talked with our kids ahead of time. We let them stay home from school, or we dismissed them early from school so they could spend one last afternoon with the dog.
Right.
This was Sandy. Again, we did not name her.
We did not name her.
And
she wasn't Sandy colored either.
No, we did try to change her name.
She was a black lab mix, and they named her Sandy. Okay.
So we let the kids say goodbye and be with her, and there was lots of crying, and we took pictures, and every once in a while, they'll kind of go back to those pictures too. That day was really special for them.
I remember she was still eating at that point, so I remember the boys were involved in making her last meal.
Yes.
You gave her some sort of people type food.
Yeah.
Right. Some sort of savory steak or something. I can't quite remember, but they were involved in that sort of ceremonial thing.
And we asked them how involved they wanted to be. We talked about what the doctor would be doing. We talked about the fact, in very simple language, that Sandy couldn't walk anymore. She had reached a point where she couldn't walk anymore, and she really had stopped kind of having a good quality of life, and that the doctor would come out and give her medicine that would make her sleep, and then her heart would stop, and so it would just look like she went to sleep. And then the doctor would take her body, and then we would get her remains. So it opened up the door to a conversation around cremation.
Right.
These are conversations that as parents are difficult to have, and our instinct is to not have them, to just minimize, to just take the dog to the vet, have one of us be there, and then come home and move on, put all the dog stuff away. For some families that might work well. For us, it didn't. And I think we're really glad about the way that we handled it. So we asked the boys if they wanted to be there, Did they want to, their options were they could be in the room the whole time. They could be touching her when it happened. They could be in the other room, like in their bedrooms. They could be out somewhere with a family member, a different family member, extended family, or they could sort of have a fluid decision and decide what they wanted. And ultimately, they both decided to be present.
Right.
And it was like a beautiful, terrible moment.
It really was.
You know,
such a powerful memory for our family.
So the vet came, the vet tech came, our other dog was present, and we were able to have Sandy die in our arms, all four of us. We sat in front of our fireplace and held her, and I think that is something all four of us will remember. It was heartbreaking and devastating, but it allowed us as a family to experience that grief and that loss together. And I think it was it was so much more rich and, I don't know, beautiful, I think, than if we had decided to, then comparing it to what we had to do with our other dog, Luna, which was a very similar kind of lead up. In that maybe Luna was more stubborn, and
she was so stubborn.
There wasn't
Sandy was ready, and she told us she was ready.
And Luna, we'd had since 2 years after we got Sandy, so we'd had her
2 or 1,
maybe just one,
like a year and a half or
we'd
so.
We'd had her
right
a very long time. Same thing with the boys. They'd only known life with Luna and Sandy, and as Luna got older, and this is where people that know us, if they're listening, this is where they will cry. Because Luna was everybody's favorite. Yes. She was like an amazing dog. But she wasn't going to let go on her own. And she was stubborn. And our vet, same vet office was like, guys, like the time has come. And we didn't do it in the home.
No.
And I don't remember what. I think we tried to.
Yeah, I think it just wasn't
an option. It was like a scheduling. Yeah. The vet's office was the same vet's office, but that vet wasn't available. I think we lucked
out with Sandy, so being able to do it in the home.
Yeah, so they weren't available to do it in the home. So that option was kind of off the table, but then we still allowed the boys to talk about, do you want to be present? Do you want to go to the vet's office? Do you want to be in the room? Do you want to do it the same way that we did with Sandy? And ultimately they decided no. I don't know if it's because it wasn't home and it's not as comfortable, but they decided not to. And so what they asked for was the same thing we did with Sandy. We allowed them to say goodbye and have time with her, and that was very sad. And then she got carried into the car, and Josh was our superstar and took her, and actually was the only one with her when she died. And I stayed home with the boys, and we all just cried, and we leaned into that grief, and we're very kind of real about it. We spent a lot of kind of quality family time together. And another tip is that we were open about it. And we told our friends, and our friends were wonderful, friends that know us and that know our kids. And they really kind of pushed us, encouraged us to go out that night, to come over to someone's house. And everyone was really open and supportive. People talked about it. There wasn't that awkward, like, let's not talk about the elephant in the room. Let's not talk about the fact. We don't want to remind them that they're suffering and they're grieving. Instead, people talked about it, and they said, we're so sorry. We loved Luna. She was such a great dog. And they hugged us, and they took care of our boys, and they took care of us, and that was really important. And we certainly
shout out to those guys. You know who you are.
We certainly could have not shared that. We could have kept that experience really close to our heart and been more private about it. But I'm glad we weren't, because it allowed us to get some support that I think all four of us needed.
Well, and I want to talk about how important it was for us to grieve together.
As a family?
As a family, the four of us. I have such memories that comfort me when I think about them, crying all together, being together before, during, and after both of these losses.
Yeah.
Right.
And still, so I think those experiences set the stage so that when any one of us are struggling, just last night our new TV has a screensaver feature, which we're still trying to figure out. And
I don't know where they're getting these pictures from.
Jacob was able to find some really old photos, and it was only the three of us sitting in the room because our teenager doesn't always sit with us. But when a picture of Luna came up under her tree, there was this like collective, aw. And we were able to
Right.
share in our sadness that we miss her. And so I think the way that we approach that grief, that loss, allows us to be able to, in a very normal way, circle back around to it and
Right.
normalize, like, I'm still sad about that.
And that's the thing about pet loss. I don't know, maybe you can speak on this from a clinician standpoint, but for some reason, pet loss just, I don't know, it lingers. Like feeling of them not being with us anymore, and how it's, for me, it's just right under the surface, and there's something that can just trigger me, and there it is, and I'm crying again and thinking about them.
I think that's because, not to minimize any human deaths that
Right.
you've had in your life, but I think because for you, those losses are the individuals that were closest to you. So they're the most profound losses for you. They're also part of your daily routine. You know, you'd wake up, you'd take them outside, you'd feed
Right.
them. There's the tree they would sit under. You know, there's sort of a routine that then changes. So I think that's part of it. I think a lot of people would say they feel the exact same way about a human that they've
Right.
lost, that it lingers. That's grief. It doesn't go away. There is no such thing as closure. Closure does not exist.
I think that's probably something we're going to hear a lot throughout this show.
It's a big thing for me.
Right.
I think that we've got this myth as a society, as a culture, that when you lose someone or something, that you should, grieve openly for a day or so,
And that's
then
when
move
you've
on.
been successful, right? Is when you say you have the closure,
Yeah,
quote
you're
unquote,
being
and you're like,
strong.
Right.
Yeah, you've moved on. You found closure. That is a lie. If we were not a clean show, I would swear right there, but I didn't.
We're
closure.
clean.
Closure is a myth, and so I think you're kind of a great example of that
Right.
with your pet loss. But I think a lot of other people have that same level of connection with humans. We've just been really fortunate that we haven't had that level of loss at this point.
Well, and I think to take your tip about the memorial service a step further, I guess the anniversaries are important too, especially with pets, and not just the anniversary,
with all loss.
right? Not just the anniversary of the actual death, but important seasons or important events throughout the year that may have been something that makes you think of your pet. For instance, Christmas time for me pops up a lot, and one of our family members got us a really nice candle when Luna died that has a lot of nice sayings on it. It's actually to honor pets, to honor your lost pet. And we light it on Christmas Day. Christmas morning, we're opening presents together as a family and to honor Sandy and Luna and their memory. So you can extend that idea of a memorial service or an anniversary right throughout the year.
Yeah, commemoration. And it is something that's important, not just with pet loss, but in fact, with a lot of my patients that I see who are with me for grief and bereavement support, when they're at a place where they're particularly struggling and they're not quite sure why, I always explore with them the concept of anniversaries. Tell me about your loved one, and is there anything important about this time of year? Was there a birthday? Was there an anniversary? Was there a trip you took? Was there just something that makes you think about them? And more often than not, the answer is yes, there is something. Just our brains are so amazing that they can make those connections before we even really realize it. So anniversaries are a big thing. Smells, sounds, all of that. So yes, when you lose a pet, but it doesn't just go away.
Right.
That loss is always there. One of the tips I had was to don't be so quick to put everything away.
Right.
And there's a caveat there, because for some of you might want to be quick to put things away. It's sort of an individualized decision what's going to be best for your family. Again, with our losses, with our pet losses, one of our children's instincts is to put the things away and not talk about it, not remember it, just kind of, I don't want to be so public with it. I don't want to talk about it so much. And the other one is, no, I really, I'm not ready to put those things away. It's important to consider that as a family and to really think about, if your instinct is to put it all away really quickly, what impact is that going to have on your children? and on the family.
Right.
And if your instinct is to leave it out, what impact is that going to have on the family? So you've really got to kind of remember that children grieve too when we're talking about any kind of loss, pet loss, human loss.
Does that foreshadowing a little bit? Children grieve too.
What?
A future episode on children's
yes,
grief, right? I wanted to just mention too how important it is to meet them where they're at with the grief. And Jackson's our child that doesn't want to talk about it, that doesn't want to see the things. He wants the items to be put away, but he'll think of it on his own and tell us after the fact. Oh,
Yes.
I thought about Luna this morning, and I got really sad. And so I always have to take a beat and stop what I'm doing and recognize that. Give him a hug, give him a fist bump, say, it's tough, man, and talk to him in that moment and not just dismiss it. Like you have to. That's part of meeting them where they're at. Like he wasn't ready to talk about it. He doesn't like seeing this stuff, but when he brings it up on his own because he was thinking about it, just intrinsically, you have to be there for him.
Even if you are not ready, even if it catches you off guard. That's the thing about families and grief, is that families can experience the loss of the same individual, whether it's a pet or a person, the individual that lived in the same house, and they can all experience that loss differently. So you're not all going to want to talk about it at the same time. You're not all going to want to not talk about it at the same time. You're not all going to be feeling devastated and heartbroken and crying at the same time, and you're not all going to be able to share in laughter and joy about that person at the same time either. And that can be really frustrating for families and really difficult for families to process, because they might think like, what's wrong with me that I'm not able to laugh with them at the same time, or what's wrong with them that they're crying right now and we're laughing. It's important to go back to that first tip that everything is unique. Every individual, every child, every loss experience is unique. There's no right or wrong way to grieve.
Right.
Okay. The other thing I wanted to say about kids and their response is that children's reactions to grief can kind of be summarized in a really simple way into 3 kinds of activities, 3 kinds of behavior or feelings: sad, mad, and bad. So often the way that we see children express their feelings of grief are through expressing sadness, which for us as adults is difficult and it's uncomfortable for a lot of adults. It's hard for us to see sad children, and our propensity is to try to make them feel happy. We shouldn't. Right. We should allow them to feel sad. We should model for them that that's okay. It's okay to have sad days. It's okay to remember their loved one. It's okay to remember their deceased pet. It's okay to be sad. They also, another big emotion they feel around loss is anger or mad. That's an emotion we're more comfortable as adults allowing children to feel, and we're more apt to put some tight boundaries and parameters around that, and not allow children to express their anger. But sadness and anger are 2 of the most common reactions for adults and children when there's a loss. We're really sad that that person or that pet is gone, and we're really angry that now we have to live without them. Those are really natural reactions, but we have a hard time as adults responding to those reactions in children. And when we see kids who are being too mad or who are being too sad, we tend to label their behavior as bad, when really that's just children grieving. So we have to keep that in mind. Which leads me to sort of, I think, one of my final tips is that when you have a loss, a pet loss, of course this also extends to human loss, it's really important to tell the other adults in your child's life.
Yes.
It's really important for coaches and neighbors and troop leaders and dance coaches. We don't have kids that do dance. Dance teachers.
Dance coaches.
Any other adult that might, or teachers, any other adult that might be in your child's life, it's really important to cue them in and say, hey, here's what's going on in my kiddo's life. Let me know if you're seeing anything different, or, just be on the lookout that he might be feeling a little extra sad. He might be feeling a little extra mad. He might be off, and it doesn't mean that he's bad or that he's breaking rules. It means he's grieving. And so let's work together. So really important. Again, I think a lot of adults tend to just keep it private But this is an opportunity, a time where we really should be kind of leaning on and leaning into the community and making sure that we're providing a really supportive environment for our kids.
Absolutely. And I wanted to mention, sort of tie in a little bit about what I do professionally in the field of organ and tissue donation. One of the things that helps with grief and loss is the opportunity that some folks have for their loved ones to be donors and to remember their loved ones' legacy in life and continue that story with them helping other folks through the wonderful gift of organ and tissue donation. Well, that element is actually becoming available in pet death. Believe it or not, there are organizations and programs that are involved with utilizing pet loss as a source of organ and tissue donation for pet recipients, for animal recipients. There's programs all over the country actually starting up that there's a pet organ donation network. And one of the organizations I was just looking at, they have 100% authorization rate, which means all of the families that they've asked to participate in this program have said yes, which is, in my field, that's an amazing number. And all throughout the country, of course, there's families. Organ and tissue donation may not be for everybody for a variety of reasons, and so there's always a group of people that say no. But this particular program, all of their families have said yes to this amazing opportunity for their pets that have died. And I guess a lot of the research, they've got some research organs that have affected the treatment of canine and feline diabetes. There's been pancreas donation from pets that have died, and they've done a lot of research on those pancreas to inform this diabetes treatment, which is amazing. And that, again, can help a family grieve. We've talked a lot about, in my field, about how important it is to have that be part of how important it is in the grieving process that their loved one was a donor. And now that opportunity is there in the pet and animal world too. So I thought that was pretty cool. I wanted to talk about that.
No, thank you for sharing that. That's interesting. And I wasn't aware of that at all.
Yeah, it's just something that I'm very recently was made aware of, and I like to learn more about, actually. So,
speaking of learning more about, what we will do in the show notes is post a link to actually an article that I wrote about this, which is where we sort of derived a lot of these tips from. So if you were listening along and wanted to sort of jot down some of those ideas, you don't have to. You can go to the website that will be posted in the link. It's actually changingperspectivesblog.com, but I will link to the specific article that's on that blog about pet loss and tips for approaching and addressing pet loss with children. And I'll also include some other links as well. My website, jennibrennan.com/resources, has a number of resources like things, for instance, book lists for books on children's grief. So if you're looking for more information on this topic, we will have that for you listed in the show notes.
Absolutely. Do you have anything else?
I think ultimately that's it. I think the closing piece would be just to be kind of honest and real. And
be real, right?
I say this a lot. I say lean into it a lot. And I always smile when my patients then start saying it, but they do start saying that. But this is something to lean into. This is a great way to bring a family closer, to share in grief with each other, and to teach each other about grief and loss. Because just as we teach our children about grief and loss through these pet losses, they also taught us.
They really did. And I think by leaning into it, death or loss can be something that pulls a family apart and adds stress and can make you not as close. But if you lean into it and grieve together and talk, I think that will bring you closer.
Even if it's messy.
Right.
Being willing to kind of go to that, sort of the depths of despair and be there together and create a space that's where it's okay to express your feelings. It's okay to ask questions. It's okay to fall apart. And it's okay to then kind of pull yourselves back together as a family. So pet loss can be a wonderful opportunity to do some of that, and can set a really strong foundation for your kids as they move through life, because they're going to have to handle death. They're going to have to face death.
Absolutely. And I think that we didn't talk about this, but pet loss, if you're a family that has pets, or a family full of animal lovers like us, it's going to happen. They just don't live as long as us. Their lifespans are shorter. And so we're going to experience this. A lot of families are going to go through this. So, using these resources to learn about how best to handle it, that's going to be the best for your family.
Yeah. So thank you for listening.
Yes, thank you. I think that's going to do it for today. You can learn more on this topic by going to the resources page that Jenni had just mentioned and checking out changingperspectivesblog.com, the article about pet loss. Go ahead and follow us on Facebook at Changing Perspectives Podcast and on Instagram at Changing Perspectives Blog. Or you can, of course, please do. We encourage you to send us an email to changingpodcast@gmail.com. And, of course, go ahead and subscribe to the show so you'll never miss an episode. We'll see you next time. Say bye, Jenni.
Bye, Jenni.
Bye.
The Changing Perspectives podcast is produced, recorded, and edited by Dizzy-Bird Studios, Whitman, Massachusetts. Visit Dizzy-Bird Studios on Facebook, facebook.com/Dizzy-Bird Studios.